Good morning. Hi, I'm Ian Fales. Welcome back to THU TV. It's my fifth day here at Troya. It's hard to keep track sometimes. We're back on the couch with Robert Valley. Hey, Robert.
Good morning, Ian.
How you going?
I'm fine, thank you.
It's sometimes tough to get up in the morning, isn't it?
Uh,
At THU, I mean.
I'm glad I ran into you in the elevator this morning.
That's right.
Yeah,
I'm glad I ran into you too.
yeah, that was a funny little coincidence.
We're going to talk about persisting at it in terms of your craft, because that's how I feel you got Pea Cider and Cigarettes made.
Yeah,
That's your animated short, Oscar-nominated animated short that hopefully lots of people have seen. I love it, and I just love how you stayed on the production for basically years and years, right? Doing it all on your own.
yeah. I mean, it's hard to really measure exactly how long it took because I had to sort of spend time not working on the film in order to get it done. And that was also part of the process. So in other words, I needed to make money and cash up a little bit.
Yeah.
And get some wind in my sails before I took another run at it. And
Yeah.
so I would say the whole process has taken probably about 5 years, 6 years,
Right.
something like that.
Which is still a long time for any project. And
Yeah.
sometimes, it's hard to stay on something for that long, but you obviously managed it.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the script the night that my son was born. And so he's turning 7 in November.
Okay.
And that was a year ago that the film was released. And then there was other large periods of times within that the last 6 years where I had to do different things. Like I worked at Disney for a year, did some other things. So
Yeah.
I would say if you were to put it back to back, would have been a good solid 3.5 or 4 years.
Because people will know your work, but I'll just go through some of it. Tron Uprising is something you worked on. You worked at Passion Pictures on a lot of projects, and some Gorillaz music videos is what you're also known for. Are those the things that you did beforehand or during to sort of cash up? Is that what were some of the projects you were doing to keep yourself afloat?
Well, I had a run at Passion Pictures that lasted for several years. And then it seemed like Pete Candelan, who was sort of the main guy I worked with at Passion, and Jamie and myself all kind of went in our separate directions after, it was right before my son was born. That would have been 2011.
Okay.
Jamie, he got married and moved to Paris. And Pete, he had a kid and moved to New York. And I had a kid, and I moved to Los Angeles. So we all just sort of like disbanded,
Right.
I thought. And that sort of marked sort of the end of that particular kind of run of work that we had. And 3 months after my son Jackson was born, I was sort of sitting at home in Vancouver, kind of lamenting that I didn't really have any work to do. And I phoned up Charlie Bean, who was the director on Tron, and I said, "Okay, I'm ready." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'm ready to commit myself to working at Disney. If you guys will get me a visa."
Right.
And so he says, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah." So they got me a visa, and then we drove down to LA. And that was about it. I think the whole LA thing went on for about 2 years. But the longer I worked at Disney, I mean, when we started Tron Uprising, I thought I was going to come down and just work on a few shorts.
Right.
I didn't realize what I was getting myself into. And then when I came in, they had the production schedule on the producer's wall. And I was just like, "Oh my God, this is
Really?
going to go on for the next 18 months? He said, "Yeah, what did you think you're just getting yourself into?" I was like, "Oh God."
In some ways, is that good to have a job for that long, or is it not what you were after at the time necessarily? Was something that would
No,
take up that much time?
I'm all about the work you do for yourself,
Okay.
and not so much about the work that you do, like the money work. So, I mean, I changed up my presentation for this. It was specifically geared towards the process of making Pear Cider and cigarettes.
Yeah.
But the presentation that I've been sort of focusing on this year, because I've been sort of doing the festival circuit, it's everything that you do independently. So it has to do with my books, it has to do with my Massive Swerve short film, has to do with everything leading up to Pear Cider and cigarettes. That's the stuff that I really care about.
Yeah.
So I don't talk about Gorillaz too much.
Sure.
I don't talk about any of that other work. As much as I like that stuff, I just sort of want to focus on the independent sort of work.
Well, let's talk about Pea Cider. That, I know, started as a graphic novel comic book, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about how you even came up with the idea for it.
Well, it was a very elaborate idea that I came up with, and this was the idea. I want to take a project that I wrote. It was important that I wrote the story, and go from book to animation and document the whole process. And the documenting of the process, I thought would be have some educational value. I would also generate some income. So, I made, at certain points when I was working on the film, I would take time out and basically make a record of the events that were taking place. So, there's certain points where I just kind of got like completely involved in the production, and I wasn't doing that. But that was the idea, basically, is the fact that I was documenting the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I thought it could be a good kind of a resource for people that were like-minded as me, people that wanted to pursue independent filmmaking with a shoestring budget.
The actual story in it is quite a personal one, isn't it? About a childhood friend. Whether that's embellished or not, but you could tell me. How did you feel like you could adapt that personal tale to something that worked in animation?
Yeah, I say I wrote a script, but I didn't write anything. I just remembered the story. So I think, like I said, it was written that night that my son was born. And I just basically, I just had that story kicking around my head for probably about 3 years. And then when I started writing it, it just all sort of just came out. Like I just vomited the story out from start to finish. And when it was done, I kind of felt like I had a complete expression of the story that was that came out in a very unique sort of circumstance. And it's not a perfect story, but I like the way it sort of it came out. And so people, when I was trying to get funding and working on the production part of it, they'd analyze my story and they'd look at, just the way it is, and they'd say, yeah, you should change it. It's not interesting in the third act. It has no third act. We don't like the character. The end of the story's a bummer, this kind of thing. And so I just have to say, well, sorry you feel that way, but the fact is that this is an accurate account of the way I remember things. I'm not saying it's the gospel. I'm just saying this is how I remember it. And I wanted to stay true to how I remembered things. And at the end of the day, just sort of ended up with the story the way it was. And, it's just how it was.
Yeah. The point there is, I guess, you wanted to tell what you wanted to tell.
Yeah. Nobody was giving me any money, so I
Yeah.
could do whatever the hell I wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a certain point where I thought, I'm glad nobody's giving me any money. Because it It was great. Now, I mean, my producer in London, Cara, was probably the only person I talked to when I was working on this production. And I'd keep her in, like, she would be the main person that I was communicating with.
Right.
And that was just the way it was. It was good.
What was your process in terms of laying it out? Did you do a lot of just concepts and boarding, or did you just launch straight into, your animation process, which I want to talk about as well, which we'll get to, but just sort of planning it out?
Okay, well, I wrote the script back in 2011, and then I just kind of left it alone because I had to work for that Tron production schedule. But the longer I was kind of working in this production, the more I felt compelled and motivated to get back to work on my film. So when I was working on Tron, I was putting about $1,000 a month away in the bank. And so when that production was over, I had about $40,000 in the bank, and I had basically an open schedule. So I had I remember that conversation I had with my wife. I said, I want to pursue this project because those guys, they have to be on board with what I'm doing.
Right.
They got to know, because they have to prepare for whatever's entailed in finishing it. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're not going to bring home that paycheck every week after that.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a bit of a compromise. And I had to convince them that at the end of the day, there's going to be a goal that would make it all worthwhile. And I remember saying to them, my son and my wife, I just want to get an Academy Award nomination. I don't want to win, but I want to get nominated.
You said that?
Yeah. That was the goal all along.
Really?
Yeah, to get a nomination, because I thought that would help to raise my station in life and get from wherever I was to that next level. So it was a very conscious goal. Yeah. I don't think I answered your question, but...
No, that was much more interesting. I'm curious about, once you had the story and you knew it was going to be an animation thing as well, do you draw everything first, or did you launch into using Photoshop?
Oh, okay, yeah. That goes back to your last question, actually. Yeah, I spent a couple of months thumbnailing out the whole story.
You did?
And that took somewhere between 2 and 3 months, just doing little thumbnails. And that was the most significant part of the whole production, because there was one aspect of the film, which was the writing of the script, which was sort of getting the story down. But the next significant step was to try to accurately record the events as accurately as I could recall them. And I mean, that's such a delicate part of the production for me, because if that expression comes out wrong, if the drawing is if it's just recorded not accurately, it contaminates that particular idea, and I can't seem to go back to the source again. So, that's why I took as much time as I did to do the thumbnails, because that needed to be done in a delicate kind of way. Yeah.
Do you feel like you have to finish the thumbnailing before you really launch into any kind of final production, final animation?
Oh, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because once that's done, the thinking part of the production, that you don't have to deal with that anymore.
Sure.
And so what you have are these little milestones these little expressions that sort of keep you on track, and that's what sort of kept me focused while I was working on the production.
When you did start animating, well, here's something that happens. Whenever I watch the film or someone I know watches it, I then tell them that you basically animated the whole thing in Photoshop, right?
Yeah.
That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. People think you use TV Paint or After Effects sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to do it like that?
Well,
Because it's really effective. I mean, clearly, but people would be surprised, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, TV Paint, we used that on that last Gorillaz production, and that was, it was good. It was, but I kept sneaking away and doing my scenes in Photoshop. Except when the line producer would come by, I'd sort of bring up the TV Paint window, and then when she'd leave, I'd go back to Photoshop.
Alt tab.
Yeah, all the time. Because she'd go, "Why are you doing this?" She just work in TV Paint. But I mean, I've got this sort of elaborate kind of, as far as my film goes, it's sort of a way of colorizing the frames, which is very specific to Photoshop. And it's like, it has to do with the color profiling. And there's certain filters I use, like a noise filter, that doesn't even translate to other Adobe software programs. It doesn't translate even into After Effects. It's just specific to Photoshop. So the books were done, once the story was written, and I did the thumbnails, then I made the graphic novels.
Exactly.
And I spent a year doing the graphic novels.
Right. I didn't mean to skip that step.
No, but yeah, that was the next part of the process.
Yeah.
And that all was done in Photoshop. And then I wanted, like, the goal was to make the film look like the panels from the comic book were being animated. And not just like, this is an adaptation or a version of the book. I wanted it to look like the panels were being animated. And so it just made sense to continue that process in Photoshop. It made it a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, just obviously it was your style, but it was also production friendly, seeing as you had the Photoshop files done already.
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing the book, I didn't know at the time that I was going to be animating in Photoshop, but I knew that at some point it was going to be animated in some sort of animation platform. And so I formatted the panels just like you would with any sort of animation production, the comic book panels. So there's background, midground, foreground, effects, et cetera, et cetera. And so when it came time to actually start animating the panels, it felt like I was about 25% down the production pipeline.
Right.
I was already well down the pipeline. Yeah.
One of the things that makes the film as well is the music, clearly, and sound. I seem to remember at some point you had a Kickstarter for the film as well.
I did two during the whole process. I did two Kickstarters.
Oh, did you? Tell me a bit about that and how they went and how challenging that was to get the word out.
It was great. I mean, the first Kickstarter I did was to finance the printing for the second book.
That's right. Yeah.
And I raised, I think, just under $30,000 US. And
were you surprised?
Was I surprised?
Yeah. That's obviously the first Kickstarter you'd ever done.
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah, I was. I mean, there was something about my film. It felt like the unfundable project that nobody could get behind. I could never convince the National Film Board or Netflix or any of these executives to get behind it. I think they just kind of looked at it and they just sort of saw something that it was just not it didn't have like an end, which was something that they've seen before. it was kind of like questionable.
Okay.
Like the target group, it's an adult. It's sort of documentary-ish. It's the animation style is again, it's sort of an adult sort of animation style. I mean, there's no market for that, and so it felt like I was working on the unfundable project. Except when I sort of took it to the crowdfunding platform, then it seemed like I could get 1,000 people to buy into it.
Well,
I couldn't get one guy with money to get into it, but I could get 1,000 people with a little bit of money
which
to
is,
get
of
into
course,
it.
the whole point of crowdfunding.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and finding people who wouldn't normally be
Yeah.
vocal about these things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and well, you did it twice, so you obviously thought it was successful. The second one was for the music, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. So the first experience with Kickstarter was a good one. It was really good. And I made a mental note of how things went. And then as we got towards the end of the animation production, Cara Speller, who was my producer, and myself, we said, okay, let's do another Kickstarter for two reasons. Obviously, we needed to raise about $90,000 to finish the film. So it was a necessary thing. And the other reason was when you're doing these campaigns, it sort of puts your project on the radar, and it acts as a promotional sort of like it's almost like a social media.
Absolutely.
It feels like a social media.
Yeah.
And people got more enthusiastic about the Kickstarter campaign than they did about the release of the film. Because they were like, let's finish it.
Yeah.
Let's help them finish it.
Yeah, it's like championing you to get it done.
Yeah. I mean, if they push me through the prickle bushes, I've sort of blazed a path that they can sort of follow through afterwards.
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt like the independent nature of the film was something that people were kind of wanted to get behind and sort of see get done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do you know what? We're nearly out of time. That went so quickly. But I'm dying to know what
stuff to talk about.
I'm dying to know what your Oscars experience was like because of that comment you made, which is that you wanted to get a nomination.
Yeah, totally surprising.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it was a total surprise.
Right.
Because the film came out and it didn't get accepted into any film festivals. It didn't make it into Annecy,
Right.
South by Southwest, Sundance, Toronto Film Festival, Vancouver Film Festival. Right across the board, everybody was just saying, no thanks. And then we got an Oscar nomination out of the blue, basically. And
from a festival that you were able to get into, or just literally out of the blue?
well, no, it was more planned than that.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's two ways to get an Oscar nomination.
Oh, okay.
The front door is you need to win a major like AAA festival,
Yeah.
like Toronto Film Festival,
Yeah.
Sundance, Annecy would do it. That's the front door. The back door is a bit more complicated
Okay.
than that.
I'm sure we can talk about that another time. Well, I really loved it. And I mean, the point is as well, you're right, there's not necessarily a wide audience for it, except that there is, online and sort of through Kickstarter and through other means.
Yeah.
And I think only people who are doing it independently like you can probably be able to explore that side,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's harder to do that commercially is what I mean.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the crowdfunding was the best thing about that whole process.
Oh, right. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Just in the last 20 seconds, this is your first time at THU. How have you found it, man?
Getting fucked up every day. And I'm not even done yet.
That might be the quote that we use on the website. On that note, I think we might wrap up and we're going to finish up. Thanks, Robert. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it. Yeah.